Welcome to another session on compressors. Super excited to chat with you today about replacing semi-hermetic parts. This is something that I think is really important to dive into, and I know many of you have changed components, replaced components, and this may be just a few tips and tricks you may get out of it. We're going to get into some resources to find the proper resources, the things that you need to look for in semi-hermetics. Before I get kicked off, though, I want to talk about a few things. I don't know if you've heard, but Emerson sold their business to an investment firm, Blackstone, and now they renamed themselves Copeland. Super excited about that because I've worked in Copeland for a long time. I worked at Emerson, but I really like the name, so I'm glad they went with that brand name. Secondly, if you haven't heard of this event, it's called World Refrigeration Day. It's every June 26th. A good friend of mine, Stephen Gill, started this to really recognize professionals like yourself, World Refrigeration Day. I will be doing an event with Omega Solutions on this June 26th. Anytime that day, if you're on social media, tag World Refrigeration Day, give them a shout out. They're doing a lot of work to recognize what we do as professionals globally. Once again, World Refrigeration Day is June 26th every year, and to celebrate all of us. So let's dive into it. So what we're going to go through today and what I'm going to talk about is getting into some semi-hermetic components. So the parts in a compressor, a semi-hermetic compressor, and we're going to specifically talk about Copeland and Bitzer. I do have information on other ones, but in the amount of time that we have here, I've got a chance to go through at least some of these. I could spend a full day on each one of these because there's so much information. So I'm going to try to give you some high-level overview, and if you can think of stuff that you need to be answered, or if you have questions, reach out to me. You can send me emails, chat, put it on social media, right? And tag Refrigeration Mentor, and I'll see if I can answer those questions. Here to help. We're going to go into where to find the right resource. I think this is key, very, very important to understand when you're working on the different semi-hermetics. You could have one 4-cylinder compressor and then that's medium temp, and then another one that's a 4-cylinder medium temp compressor, but they have different things going on inside them. So this is something that we want to talk about, and we're going to dive in a little bit. We're going to get into steps of changing the parts. What steps and procedures should you take and what you should look for, because this is really important. I've changed lots of different semi-hermetics. I changed lots of different parts, but sometimes I didn't know why or what I was changing until I've done enough, asked enough questions, and then I'm working for the manufacturer to really figure a lot of it out, to be honest with you. That's why I'm sharing this information. Different requirements we're going to get into, which is very important because different compressors are going to have different specs, kind of like I talked earlier. And then we're going to get into the questions and a game. Okay, for those who are listening, I'm going to try to explain this, who's not looking at this, but this is a diagram of a Copeland refrigerant cool compressor. This is the internals. If you didn't know, you can get these offline. You can find a drawing. Sometimes it's not super easy. The Copeland Europe is way better. They have that at this point. I'm not sure. I know when I worked at Copeland, they were trying to implement some of this, and it may be done. I kind of looked in Copeland Mobile. I kind of went into online product information for them. I didn't really find it. Not saying that it's not there, but I'm going to show you on the Copeland European software how to get this information that you're looking at right now. So this is the drawing, all the components that are inside this compressor. This is key. When you understand every single component in a compressor and how it works, that's going to help you better understand when you run into an issue. And this is what really you want to look for, is the different components, because I didn't know about all these components. I remember one time I was doing an install, and then from the service valve going onto the compressor, there's that little gasket that I'm going to show you and talk to you a little bit about. I do a pretty good teardown on the YouTube channel. If you want to check out the semi-hermetic teardown, if you haven't yet, go check that YouTube video, and I explain it there. But I've squished that one time. I couldn't go get one right away. I needed to get the system up and running. So I just tried to tighten it as best as possible. So this is important to understand. And at the time, I think it was so early in my career, I didn't even know that that was a gasket, to be honest with you. These are the little tips and tricks. So we're going to dive, first thing we're going to do is we're going to dive right into it. And I'm going to show you where to find this. So if you go to Google and you search Copeland spare parts. Look, Copeland spare parts catalog, it pops up right away. Okay, you click on it and it takes you to the European website. You see they got the new Copeland symbol. And then right here, is the Copeland spare parts catalog. A lot of these compressors, especially the discus, can be very similar. I'll have to find out from the North American team if they have this available yet. But you click on start, and then it takes you in, and then it gives you an option. Like you could pick from all these different compressors. There's even scrolls up there. But we're going to be talking about semi-hermetics. So right up here, this is their streamlined compressors, which are, I believe, similar, potentially similar to the North American Copeland compressors. So let's just click on it because the new style, so Copeland went from a revision from, they called it a Discus 2 compressor, which had like 14 bolts, I'm sure, to now this like 8 or 9 bolt pattern. So you can't switch those. When you have a Copeland 2D compressor, you can't switch it with like the parts for a D3 compressor. But this is what the North American latest models look like. So if we pick on one of them, so we'll just go, we won't pick the digital model right now, we'll just pick a standard, double click on it. So then you got the 4M and the 6M. Okay, you pick which one. We're gonna just pick on the 4M, which is the 4-cylinder model. And then here's all the different models. So you would have to have the model number, no different than the full model number, and then just click on it. And what's so cool about this, it takes you into this here. And if you've not seen this before, or heard about this, this is all the parts inside this compressor. I didn't even know about this until after about 3 or 4 years of working at Copeland. I found it by accident myself, just doing research and just looking and looking, because we didn't use this in North America. Maybe in Europe they use this a lot. But this here, as you can see, look at all the different parts inside a semi-hermetic. And no different, I'm going to show you Bitzer in a few minutes here. Carlisle will have the same thing. Dorin, I believe, will have it. Bach has it. Like all these different semi-hermetic compressor manufacturers will have some sort of version of this. And what's cool about understanding this, we don't get to see this as professionals in the field. You know, you're working on it, you're changing compressors out, you get to see a few different parts. You see what it looks like on the outside, you put your gauges on it, but we don't get always the opportunity to look inside. And that's why I stress highly all the time that you do pull apart compressors. If you're whatever manufacturer you're working on, pull it apart, take a look at it, take it back to your shop, take it home if you have to, do it at the wholesalers, but pull these apart. Remember, you got to take them apart safely. If they're in a live system, you got to pump it down safely. Make sure you do that. Get all the refrigerant out safely and properly. Shut the power off properly. Lock it out so you don't hurt yourself. It's all about safety, but you need to get to the point. If that's out and it's not a warranty compressor, it's either going to the scrap bin, the metal, or it's going back to a wholesaler or distributor as a core compressor, because they give you money back for those cores, because every compressor manufacturer, semi-hermetic compressor manufacturer, can reuse the compressors. They have so many turns, they can reuse them so many times until they can't, say, repair that casting again. Then they got to build new casting. But it's way cheaper for them to get these compressors back and then repair, well, actually remanufacture them. So all the big manufacturers do what they say, remanufacture, and then there's rebuilders. But I've talked to some rebuilders, they actually do some remanufacturing depending on the builders. I did see in my time tearing down rebuild compressors, a lot of issues where they'll do it different. Bitzer would be doing everything. They wouldn't just change the one thing that was wrong with it. They would inspect everything. They would make sure all the rods were correct, all the rings are all correct, all the measurements, and all that would be to spec. With the rebuilders, just say what I've seen, and I'm not saying for all of them because I know there's some good rebuilders out there. If just one cylinder failed of a 4 cylinders, they would hone out only that one cylinder and not all of them, because that does change the way the compressor capacity is. We get a little off topic here, but look at all these different components. We got dozens and dozens of different components. Well, what can we do? I'm in the field, I'm working on it, the compressor's down. Well, what can I really do? Step one, looking at this, there is multiple components that you can change or replace or check on a semi-hermetic. If you're looking on the electrical side, for an example, and I'm going to show you some things. 230. This is the terminal plate assembly. This is the whole kit and caboodle for their terminal plate assembly. If you never heard what a terminal plate assembly is, that is the plate that has all the pins, the electrical pins on there. as you can see right here, what does it say? There's a terminal plate gasket, then there's a terminal plate terminal box. You can get this in a this plate assembly pre-made if you needed to, or you can buy all the parts. Because inside here, we look really close, if I dive in here and you look, so you got some nuts, you got some washers, you got that terminal insulator. All these parts could be replaceable. And this is one thing I remembered when I was first starting out. I remember working on self-contained. It had a K-body compressor and it had a leak on the electrical gasket. This one right here. See, it says 231. There was a leak there. And at the time, I didn't really know. So I couldn't find the leak, to be honest. I was looking everywhere. I couldn't really tell. I was spraying everywhere until I took off the electrical top and I sprayed in around there. And all of a sudden, I seen a bubble in there. I'm like, oh, compressor's leaking, it's failing, got it replaced. But I wasn't aware that all I had to do was order up these parts like this gasket here, and potentially I wouldn't have had to replace that compressor. This is the things we need to do as professionals out there and see what the cost is. Sometimes, honestly, it may be cheaper to get or less expensive to buy a whole new compressor, depending on where it's at. But most of the time, and I'm seeing this time and time again, and I've seen it when I was at Copa, and I talked to the other compressor manufacturers, a lot of compressors are getting sent back and not repaired or replaced. It's just the way I talk to wholesalers and distributors, and they're like, we used to sell millions of dollars worth of compressor components and parts, and now we sell, like 20 years ago, and now we sell not even close to that amount. It's kind of like it's a disposable product, compressors. This is not the way we should be thinking. We are professionals, and we should be able to understand if it should be replaced or repaired. That's really the key. So this is one example. If you have, on this 4-cylinder compressor, if you have a leak in this terminal plate, you would probably just buy these new gaskets that goes in this section and just repair that, and then you fix the leak. Now this $10,000 compressor, whatever it costs, I don't know the price of it, but now you saved your customer. Do this replacement. I would say maybe it's I don't know even what it is, a couple hours of time and the parts. Nowhere of cost, just the cost for the compressor alone would be way higher than being able to do this replacement. But you need to understand what you're supposed to do and how you replace this component. We got a gasket, so you know for sure if you pull it off, you're going to replace that gasket. Anytime you're replacing any components on compressors, semi-hermetic, you got to replace that gasket. You have to, because if you don't replace the gasket, there's such a high probability you're going to have a leak. I didn't do it in the past because I didn't know. I was like, okay, I just pulled it off very quick. I just took a quick look. Oh, it shouldn't damage it too much. Put it back on, tighten it, and spray it. Oh, I don't have a leak. But it doesn't mean it won't leak in a week's time because I didn't put a new gasket on. So just be aware of that. So if we pull out, that's just one thing that we could potentially replace if needed. So let's take another look. Right here, look at 160 on this compressor. This is the valve plate kit with gasket. So you click on this and it actually brings you to the very top up here and it gives you a full description. If you double click on it or you press info right here, it tells you the information on it. And if there's more details in the notes, you can put notes, what compressors it's used on. So it's pretty cool because it shows you these are the different, this is the compressor works on. It probably goes on this compressor as well. Make sure you check out that eye. You click on the eye, okay? Then there's gaskets, right? Right here, 180. This is below valve plate gasket. This is below cylinder head gasket. So if you take this apart, and you should be checking this stuff, if you ever have a compressor and it's not pumping properly, well, why isn't it pumping properly? Once again, pump down that compressor, isolate it, and take a look at it. You got to look inside here. On this compressor here, well, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bolts. Okay, if you pumped it down, electrically locked out, evacuate it or got the refrigerant out, get it down to 1 psi of the compressor, you loosen these bolts here. Make sure you leave 2 in a little bit and then knock it because you never know if there's gas underneath the head. Okay, so just give it a knock because if there is, you don't want this to be blowing oil or anything pressure in your face. So safely, I always leave 2 in on the opposite sides a little bit and just take them out a bit so I can knock it with a rubber mallet If the compressor is failed, I use just a regular hammer, whatever I can knock it off with, and then loosen it up and then take it apart and then take a look. So pull these apart slowly, right? Because when you're looking in these parts, maybe the parts could still be good. If you pull them off and all of a sudden you drop the valve plate on the floor and you ding it up, you're probably gonna have to replace that valve plate even if it's still good. And you'll see in here that you have the valve plate itself. So these are parts that you can replace. But one thing you got to be very, very aware of is that if you take it apart, you need to go get the gasket. If you don't have the gasket there with you and you need to get it back up and running, you know that's not the issue, and you need to get it back up and running and check it and do a test. By all means, put it back together. Use the proper specs, but you're going to have to go back and change those gaskets because they will leak prematurely. And then the big thing is these are all torque spec. So every compressor manufacturer has specific torque spec. Even when I showed you right here on this electrical terminal plate assembly, these are all specifically torqued. And I've talked to so many people, oh, I just use a 1/4 inch. Well, if you do it the right way, the way that's how the manufacturer does it. They put it to these specific specs. What most manufacturers have seen is that bolts and screws and nuts are put on way tighter than the spec. I've seen it and did it. I pulled compressors apart at the manufacturers where it was way out of spec. They check that. The manufacturer will check what the spec of each of these are coming out when they're doing their inspection. Because if this is supposed to be 300, or the ones inside here that holds the rod to the crankshaft, which we'll talk about in a second, there's a specific spec on that. And they will try to take it apart at that spec. And if it doesn't come apart, they'll see how hard it is to come apart. They'll know that someone torqued this down tighter than it should be. And we'll talk about requirements in a few minutes here. So that's another component. There's also other parts like 204 here. This is the pipe, they call it a pipe socket here. Well, that's the pipe socket to go out. That's the wrong one that I want to talk about. There's a gasket right here, so this could be, but the screens on this one are right here. So sorry, the number 30. So suction screen with gasket. So that suction screen goes in over that stator to protect that winding inside there. In case of us not properly installing the system, dirt inside there like copper or metal or shavings, this is here to protect that. It's also for flow. It's also for mass flow. So some compressors will have different designs for different mass flows. So they adjust it. And they add these different plates in there for how that cooling goes across the motor, because this is the motor. We got our refrigerant coming back in, cooling the motor. Another thing is right down here, we're talking about the sight glass. There's a gasket on there. So if you work on low temp R22 old systems, if you looked at that sight glass, it's just brown or black sometimes. You should take it apart. If you're doing an oil change, you should have all the gaskets, order them up for these sight glass or even new sight glass assemblies, and clean them all. Put new ones on there. You put new oil or new refrigerant if you're doing a retrofit. Upgrade that compressor a little bit so it's not black when you put that oil in there. At least take it off, clean it, wipe it if it's not stained on there, and then add that new gasket. So here's another part that can be replaced. But these are the things that we don't really think about when we're just going and putting fires out all the time. This is more on the maintenance. And I'm really believing now more and more that I dive into engineering side, diving into maintenance side. Maintenance is key. If we do a better job at maintenance, our service will reduce. But what's happening, what I've seen all over the place, all over the world, and the more people I talk to, it's just us as service technicians, we're going out and we're just putting out a lot of fires and doing repair. But at the end of the day, I keep hearing it's like, well, the storeroom doesn't want to do a maintenance. We don't have a maintenance plan. We don't have a maintenance contract. There's multiple contractors working on it. At the end of the day, if there's a really good maintenance plan and execution, I think we wouldn't be working as many burnout hours as a lot of people out there are doing. So this is something you want to talk about maybe with your customers and give them a better understanding that if we do a maintenance, it's going to reduce your service call. And I've had people say, well, that's taking work away from me. No, it's not. There's so much work out there right now. If you're thinking like that, well, then that will take away from you. That's the way you think. What you think about is what you become. So Okay, another part that potentially I get this a lot of time on Copeland compressors 4 and 60, they have something called an IPR, internal pressure relief. Right here on this one, it's called 220. Pressure relief. Let's click on it, take a look what it says. Info. It doesn't give, it says just says internal pressure relief. I wish it would give what it relieves at. I do not remember. It'll be different on, I think it's different on a high pressure refrigerants to low pressure refrigerants. On the CO2, it's external. But this here is a part that potentially could be replaced. I remember I was doing a training in the US. I can't remember where it was, Buffalo or another. And the owner came up to me and it's like, Trevor, and this was one of the first, not the first one, but one of the first trainings I was doing as working for the compressor manufacturer. Like, Trevor, do you know the internal pressure relief on the 4Ds and 60s? Can they get stuck or can they fail? And I'm like, I don't even think they have it because I didn't know. I said, I don't know. I don't think they have them because I knew for sure in the 3 cylinder compressor, they didn't have it in the Copelands. And I'm like, I don't think they have it, but I wasn't sure. So he's like, come with me. He took me around to the back because we were doing a teardown that day. And I go to the back and he's like, look right here. And this is it right here. This 220. That goes right in there. And that separates the high side to the low side. And this here, this component here, what it does is someone ever mistakenly shuts that discharge valve, service valve, this one right here, 210, at the shutoff valve, if they ever shut that, that means that you're just discharging right into a deadhead. It's called deadheading. So what will happen, this here will open and you'll hear a loud shh inside to the other side of the compressor into the suction, so the compressor doesn't blow the head gasket. You still might get a blown head gasket if you do that, but at a certain pressure differential that will open up. Those can be replaced. There is a special guide that you got to look at. There's a special number of Loctite that they put in there to hold it in place. I've not seen them personally fail. I've had over the years that I've worked for the manufacturer, I've heard a couple people call and saying they failed, but there was no concrete evidence that it did fail that I've seen. But is it a part that could fail? Potentially. Something could jam in there. So that's another potential part that could be replaced. Like this one right here, we're going to talk about this discharge gasket. If it's a rubber coated steel one, you got to have that embossing towards you. But this is a part that needs to be replaced. If you take this off, or if you take this service valve off to check, because some compressor will have a little screen on the discharge and the suction to see if there's dirt in there. If you pull that off, you need to replace those gaskets. Always. I'm going to just keep pounding that in just so you know. Other parts. Right down here, I'm going to show you pictures in a little bit, but this oil screen, as well as this oil screen assembly, right? The protector. Those are parts that potentially can be replaced. If you get a crushed screen for some reason because it just filled up with dirt, replace it. Just order the parts up. They give you the part numbers here. These are the European part numbers, but you can still cross-reference this stuff. So if you're in Europe and in Copeland Mobile, as well as on online product information, they have like a lot of these part numbers. I can show you for anybody that's in the North American market where to get those part numbers. But I still haven't seen a beautiful, like a really nice diagram like this. So there's lots of other things that can be replaced, but technicians used to replace, but we don't see that anymore, especially with Copeland, because I don't even think they sell the parts readily. For example, it's like right down here, 70, this is your piston and connecting rod right here and ring. Just say if this compressor took a slug and you only broke this, it didn't affect your cylinder, and it didn't affect your cylinder. Potentially this could be replaced. That's what they used to do. They still do that in parts of the world, just really not in North America as much, as well as other manufacturers supply the components. I don't think it's as easy to get the components. That's why people aren't doing it. And I believe I've heard over the years, there's a lot of errors made in the field because you need certain tools to replace these parts. Tens of thousands of inches you need to check. So when you bolt this on, you need to make sure that connecting rod is connected properly, even if it's twisted a little bit the wrong way, where you can see the bottom that I'm showing you right here. If this is twisted a little too much, that can cause major issues. and it cause wear onto the crankshaft here. And I believe that's kind of what happened over the years. But I know for sure, I know some technicians even here in Canada that still replace certain parts, like on Bitzers, for example. And when I worked at a company in Western Canada, there used to be a technician there. His name was Tad. It was a company called Gateway. Pretty cool dude. This guy was from Poland. Hopefully he's still around, and he's probably still working refrigeration. I wouldn't doubt it. This guy was hardcore. But he used to rebuild all these compressors. But over time, even there, I've seen these compressors just continue to stay on the shelf, even though they work. And I think what's really happening, even when I talk to service manager and business owners, they're just like, I don't want to take a risk if we did do a repair, put it back, and in 6 months I have to repair it again. So I think a lot of times what you can do, if you get one up and you repair it like this, it could be that spare. If you have to have 6 week lead time, an 8 week lead time for a specific compressor, I think that's probably the area that you could use compressors where you're fixing them up like that. And then I have people that I know that are rebuilders, that they send me pictures all the time, showing me kind of how they're rebuilding and how they're changing these pistons and even stators. They're, I'm pulling stators out and changing them. That's a big process. You need a lot of tools as a field service. It's something you can't really do in the field, and in most contractors you don't have those parts. For pistons, I would say, like, if you have the skill, if you have the knowledge, you have the specs from the manufacturer, you could do this and be able to get the parts as well. So other ones here, the optical eye is another one that can be replaced. Or here it would be the Centronic sensor in North America. Optical eye they use in Europe. The big thing is that you take that off, you take the sensor off, you take the optical eye off, you need to change that copper gasket all the time. Countless times I've done it without doing that. Pull off, check the screen on the sensor. Is it good? Is it dirty? Clean the screen. If it is, just put it right back on. And I've had leaks over the years. You have to check that stuff. So spend a lot of time here on this one here. Let's check out the Bitzer one. Bitzer is called e-parts. If you work on Bitzers, you got to get to this. So I think you might be able to get it through from their software, but if you hit up the catalog here, so you go to Bitzer e-parts, that's all you have to do is write Bitzer e-parts. It'll pop it up on Google. Great thing about Google. Click on the catalog. Then you go to reciprocating compressors. As you can see, they got their screws, scrolls, condensing units. Same. These manufacturers are doing a good job in trying to give the information out to help out. Great job. So let's just pick a 4-cylinder Bitzer. There we go. We can pick any one of these models. So you want to make sure you match your models up. So I'm just going to pick on this one, 4TC-12-2. And then I think you just click on compressor right here like that. And here it is. So now, once again, here's all the components in this compressor. And as you can see, they got a gasket kit right here. So number one, full gasket kit. So that's the gaskets for for the whole compressor. And what's great about this is that this here, when you get into this, because once again, we're in the field, we don't get to see this. Some of you, this might be the first time even seeing this or even knowing this is an option for you to look at. Because once again, like I said, I worked for the manufacturer for many, many years, and I didn't see a lot of these. Or you could be even working for Bitzer or Copeland and have not seen this yet. But this is an opportunity to take a look to get a better understanding of these products, because it's going to make you better out in the field for sure. I promise you it'll make you better out in the field if you take the time to understand every component in the compressor and why it does what it does. And when you replace parts, you want to understand why. A good one here that I want to show is 241 on this Bitzer compressor. This is the suction gas filter. So this is something that may be causing a pile of issues. We know that there is to do what? What's it for? The suction filter, gas filter. If you're thinking it's to protect the stator, you're 100% right. But it'll only protect to a certain size. So if copper's coming back from your pipe, you reamed out the pipe, but it fell down and you never tried to get it out. You're like, oh, the filters will get that. Well, sometimes it gets through the filters. This here, you might have to check. And I've seen it on a few, some people send me for the CO2 compressor in industrial application with ammonia, cracked plate heat exchanger, and that causes carbonic, I can't remember the name, but when you mix CO2 and ammonia, it turns into a solid. It's like a white solid, I can't remember, carbon something. But you might need to pull this off and check it, because when they sent me the picture, this was block solid. Like the whole system needs, like a lot of stuff needs to be replaced when that happens. But this here could be full of carbon. If you didn't use nitrogen or you weren't purging while you were brazing up the system. So this is a part right here that could potentially be cleaned or replaced. But if you take that off, what do you have to do? You have to get this gasket 130 right here, the gasket for it. What else do you need to do? You need to get the specs for the bolts, these bolt torque specs, and put it in properly. So you're putting the compressor back together to the manufacturer spec. All this information is out there to do that. So another component, so right here, this motor terminal plate. Once again, if you have a leak there, that could be replaced and you could fix it and get your customer up and running and not have to do a replacement. Maybe it's in the middle of the roof and you need to you got to hire a crane to get out there and it's a couple guys and that's a lot of money. I've seen it multiple times. I've seen it. I was on a project where a compressor was deemed failed. We get it up to the site and the other compressor's up and running because it was just a contactor was the issue. This happens and I've seen it too. That's why I always double check the work that I need to do for someone else. So if I go in and have to do a compressor replacement and that other compressor is there, I do my own checks before I do the installation. I do a verification on what compressor is going in. I check the model number of each because I've done it before where I picked up a compressor, drove all the way out to the site, and it was the wrong compressor, wrong voltage. It's better to catch it at that point than you have it installed, wire up, and you hit the power on and you kill the motor. That happens. That might be happening out there right now. Someone making that mistake, not knowing. So always check the nameplate of the both compressors. They could be a little bit different, but the voltage needs to be the same. Hopefully the feet line up and you can retrofit a Bitzer to a Copeland to a Bitzer, but you want to check with that manufacturer. I've seen it done dozens of times. You got to get your compressor or customer's equipment up. You got to do what you have to do. You can't wait 6 weeks half the time. So you go and you figure out a solution and it could be changing the compressor to a different manufacturer and then changing it back if they only want the other compressor to get them through. Because I've seen long lead times for certain compressors. Other components down here, you know, maybe your crankcase heater burns out. You'll have to replace that. Okay, there's one on this side too. So they put it in multiple locations.
Hey, I want to take a minute to talk about the upcoming Refrigeration Mentor learning programs. Every couple of months, we continue to roll out live instructor-led sessions by subject matter experts on compressors, supermarket refrigeration, and CO2 refrigeration. We're really here to help you grow. Get to that next level. Head to the Refrigeration Mentor webpage, refrigerationmentor.com. Check them out. See if this interests you. Read a little bit about it because we're really here to help you. These live sessions are for you to come and ask questions, to learn a little bit, to grow. We've trained thousands of technicians from 3 to 4 to 5 years in the industry, all the way up from 20 to 30 years in the industry. Either get them to the next level or get them back on track. Build that confidence, that knowledge, and that skill set. We'd love to see you there. We'd love to have you. Now let's get a conversation going.
And just be aware. I know some contractors here in Canada, they do replace some pistons at times, but you do have to be, I don't know if you have to be a Green Point rep or not, but I know depending on the contractor, I know some technicians that do replace the pistons, sometimes just the rod itself, because that is something that they've done, they tried, they got the components to do it. What we can do for the majority of us, we can at least pump it down and check the valve plate, check these gaskets, check the cylinder, look at the piston, check the crankshaft to see how it's functioning. This is key. If you want to get good at compressors, you need to take them apart. I promise you, take them up. The more you take apart, the more you learn. It's like the more reps you're putting in. You go into the gym and you're working out. If you only go for one day, you're not going to see any muscle mass happen. But if you go every day for the next 2 years or 4 times a week for the next 6 months, you're going to see, wow, I've got some muscles now. I can walk upstairs without huffing and puffing. No different when you're working on compressors. The more you pull them apart, the more you're going to learn. And be curious about this stuff. Well, why is this gasket number 4 right here, this thrust washer here? Find out. Right? Oh, why is this weight here, this counterbalance weight there? Balance weight. Well, that gives you kind of an idea in the name, right? It's trying to balance out the crankshaft so to make sure that this rotor doesn't drag. And so these are definitely some of the things that you want to look for. These are the two things that I look at all the time if I'm going to dive into a compressor to try to really understand it. There's other components. These are just 4 cylinders that I talk about. 6 cylinders is going to look a little bit different. They'll have Venturi valves in the 6 cylinder. Well, they do in the 4 cylinder too, but they'll have 2 Venturi valves, and I think most of the 6 cylinder. Let's go back to that and let's just double check in that stream compressor. So here's the oil check valve. This one right here. This is the Venturi check valve. So those components there are inside. Those are another components that could potentially cause issues. I've heard of some people saying that this oil check valve had an issue. Basically, this is in between the stator and the rotor, or the crank section. And what it is, it protects the compressor on startups as well as an oil flow. So the compressor starts up, there's a pressure reduction, so there's a big explosion. No, it's not a big explosion, it's a startup inside there. It closes that oil check valve so it doesn't blow all the oil out the compressor. And then when it starts to run, that Venturi valve, this one right here, 130, that goes right into here. That one there, make sure that this is a lower pressure than the body where the stator is. So that oil is always flowing. So this is so important to understand, because you need to do a blow-by check. That's what you need to do. You need to check those two different pressures and see what is going on, because you always have to have that flow of oil from your suction to your oil pump, if it has an oil pump in that compressor. Okay, bolt torque specs. This is key. If you're going to replace any component in refrigeration system, and it doesn't even matter if it's compressors, it could be the oil separator, it could be a solenoid valve. They have specs. Anything with a gasket is going to have specs. So if you never heard that before, you heard it from me. Anything with a gasket is going to have a bolt torque specs. And you can see here on the left hand side, this one's the Copeland one. It's AE41219, and then the Bitzer one is KW-555-3. Look them up. This does take time. This stuff, it doesn't just happen easily. And it's like, man, I'm in the middle of this. I got to get this up and running, and people are calling. You got customers screaming at you. I understand all that stuff. But you want to do it right the first time. Take it in. They're not pissed at you. They're upset with the situation. There could have been 3 other technicians there not getting it up and running. Don't take it personally, but take your job personally. Take the craft that you're doing and the work you're doing personally, and explain to them, if I don't do this right, I might be back here in a week. I don't want to be back here in a week because I got a bunch of calls that I need to go take care of. It's going to take me a little bit longer to get this done. Be honest with the customer. They're going to chew you out some more. Just be okay, thank you. I understand. Think about how they're feeling. They're losing ice cream. It's been down for 2 weeks. I heard a story that a customer's ice cream was down for 5 weeks. I've heard stories about whole stores being down for 2 or 3 days. And sometimes it's nothing we can do about it. Sometimes it's not, but if there's something that you can do, if a compressor fails, think about getting another one. If 2 fail, you really tell the customer that there's something wrong. But if you got 4 compressors fail on a 6 compressor rack, there's something going on. There's something really wrong there. There's a miscommunication between you and the customer. Can't limp that by. And then definitely spending the time on doing it right and doing the bolt torques right, because I've seen it. There's a guy from Copeland in the US. I can't remember which plant. It's the semi-hermetic plant he works at. And we keep in touch. He sends me pictures, and he sends me pictures. And it was the first time a few years ago I realized it. He sent me a picture, and he's like, "What do you think happened here?" Sent me a few pictures. I wasn't really sure, but I could see a short. I could see some marks. He's like, "Well, what happened is on the terminal plate, the person that was working on it tightened down the bolt so much that it broke or cracked the inside, and as the compressor ran for a few days, it causes a short." He says he's seen it where they tighten it down so much, not using the torque spec, where that popped the whole wire right off. So all of a sudden you go to hit a power, it doesn't start up. It's a DOA compressor, or it's a it's a faulty compressor, it's faulty wine is, you go and put your meter on it, you check, oh, it's open. This line's open. Well, really, it came off on the inside. This is why you need to understand and tear them apart and look at them. And those technicians that are doing it, mechanics that are doing, refrigeration professionals that are doing it, they're able to find things that the standard technician's not, because they can think about, okay, is it electrical? Okay, it's open? Well, maybe let's look inside. Let's pull this off. I got some time here. Sometimes you don't have time. You need to get it's a process 24/7. You need to get them up and running. But afterwards, you need to figure out what caused that. So for an example here, center head bolts, different sizes, different grades. Depending on the model here, will be different weights that you got to tighten them up. And then same over here in the Bitzer one. If we look at the cylinder head, here, depending on the motor type, 1, 2, or 3, I believe that's what it is. Oh, fiber gasket, coated metal gasket, or just a washer. So depending on which one it is, then it gives you the information, the weight that you need to tighten those down. This stuff is key. Honestly, I didn't do this stuff when I was in the field because I didn't know. This is why I'm sharing this stuff with you. I want to share stuff that I wish I would have known when I was working on this stuff, because I know I would have did a better job. I would have felt more confident and competent when I would finish replacing a valve plate. So I know how it is. I've changed a lot of them. I know how tough it is to scrape off that gasket and try not to damage it up, or get the gasket inside in the compressor, which leaves you in a world of hurt. If you drop a piece in there, it's like, how do I get it out now? Now you got to take off the oil pump. Now, there's a big process to that. So I know how it's not always easy, especially when they're caked on there. But take your time and do it right. It's the big thing. That's what your boss is looking for. That's what your manager is looking for. Maybe it costs more time. They might be upset in the heat of the moment because there's 10 calls holding, it's 110 out, and there's many customers. But do your job right. You're going to go way further doing your job right than half-assing it and having to go and tons of callbacks. And it's only up to you. Up to you to do this right and change these parts when needed. Because sometimes you can't fix it. If that valve plate gets smashed and all of a sudden the pieces, like the reeds, are in the piston and it's just jamming them up and it scrapes all the cylinders and it busts the piston up, that compressor, you might be able to get it running. If they need it, you get another valve plate and you can't, because you can't get the full compressor. I would do it. I would get that compressor, new plate, get them up and running if it's a 6-week or 8-week lead time. You might be a little bit less capacity. You got to make sure, though, that it's not going to cause other issues with the system. But if you just have some scraped cylinders, there's going to be a little bit blow by happening. That compressor is going to need to be replaced anyway. But maybe that'll get the compressor, customer through until there's a new compressor. You got to think outside the box. You got to think outside the box sometimes. And that's what great technicians are doing. They're trying to figure, how do I keep my customer up and running for the longest period of time, especially when there's issues with the system? But you need to be proactive as well. You got to be talking and building a relationship with these customers. If you have an issue with it, you got to tell them, like, listen, this compressor, we need to really replace it. And when you build that relationship, usually they're going to start to listen to you. If you don't have that relationship, they're like, can it limp by? You say no. It can't limp by. It's running right now, but it might not be tonight. And there are going to be customers that are like, it doesn't matter. Do not replace anything. I don't want anything changed. That's on them. You make sure you fill out your service report properly and get them to sign off on it. So you cover yourself. Because there are going to be situations where you cannot do anything about it, especially when you're a replacement part. But make sure you get yourself covered and you fill out that service report properly. I explain clearly, put stars on it, that this needs to be replaced ASAP. I can order it. Customer refused to do the repair, waiting on customer approval. Because then at least you're covering yourself in some sort of way. Always follow up with a senior person at your company, your manager, if you have to, your boss. Double check with them, or whoever has the salesperson who has a relationship with them, because you want to make sure that you're covered. Because if the customer doesn't want to do the replacement, if you need to do a replacement, that's, at the end of the day, you can't make that decision. You can't just go out and buy their parts and do it. Most of the time, if you work for the company, it's different. I talked about this, wanted to show you this picture again. This is the rubber coated steel gasket. Let's dive into this for a second. I know I talked about it a little bit earlier, but I seen a lot of these. I didn't know what they did. Well, I knew they were a gasket, but I didn't know how to put them on properly, because I put a lot of these on. I don't know if I put them on right or wrong. So this, as you can see right down here, this is what you would call embossed surface. Right here. This needs to be pointed towards you when you put those on. I still haven't found or don't remember. I know I've been told there's a guy named, I believe it's Mike Williams, smart guy, Cole, really smart guy, and he explained it to me, and he had some videos that I watched, but I don't remember if it's because that embossing goes against like the discharge valve, for an example. So there's a potential that the discharge valve could move or bend or shift compared to the big casting of the compressor. But this here, that needs to be pointed towards you. And it could be on the pump. It could be on the, I believe on the cylinder, below the cylinder head. So just be aware of that. And then as well as replacing gaskets. You take a head off, you got to replace the gasket. But sometimes you get a kit and there's a bunch of gaskets in there. Well, what one do I use? What I did, because I changed a lot of them, is that I just matched it up as best as I could to the last one. But sometimes you scrape that gasket off and you don't even know what that last gasket looked like. So you can't match it up. And if somebody else replaced the gasket, it might be the wrong gasket anyway. So what do I do? Because what happens in these valve plates can go on lots of different compressors. That's why you see a lot of different gaskets. So a certain gasket will go on one compressor with the valve plate compared to another. You could have a hole here that's not in that other compressor. This is why it's important to lay it down. And the big thing, there's an application engineering bulletin that you definitely need to check out. It's the 4 and 6D parallel compressor for, I think it's digital compressor replacement, that it'll talk about the different thicknesses of the gasket, which ones you should put on, which model number of compressors. Really good. But the big thing is that you need to make sure it's the proper bore size. And what do I mean that? It's that cylinder size, bore of that. You don't want the gasket to be in it, so that piston's hitting it potentially, or you don't want it too big where you're losing more volumetric efficiency. Super key to look at that stuff. Next is the terminal plates. I talked about this already, but here's a couple pictures. You could come up to this compressor at some point and you spray you gotta shut off, isolate, you have your leak detector, electronic leak detector first, you go around and it goes off, or then you spray it with some soap. And all of a sudden you see a bubble coming out of terminal 6 here, or terminal 8. You're like, oh, this compressor's done. Not necessarily. This here, underneath there, this is a replaceable part. You just need to know how to do it. Or you can just instead of just buying the gasket, and you just change these gaskets that are here in these terminals, you can buy this whole terminal assembly depending on the compressor, depending if it has that part number, and then you don't have to just do all the gaskets. These are some of the things that you just want to understand and take a look at, because when you do that, it's just definitely going to help you out and give you a better idea of not having to replace the parts, or not have to replace the compressor, sorry. Because when you can have the opportunity to replace a part, it's going to save your customer a lot of money. It's going to save you from breaking your back, moving a 4 or 6 cylinder compressor. I've done it. We got it dropped on the side of the roof and we had to have plywood, and then we roll it 1 foot, move the plywood over, roll it to another one. Tried lots of different things. Having 4 guys carrying a compressor, it's not fun. So if you can just replace the terminal plate, potentially, it's an easier day for you. Then you're helping your customer out and helping you out in the long run. These are some of the things, and there's other parts. Like there's other compressors I didn't get into, like when you get blocked unloaders. There's different gaskets there. One for when it's fully loaded, one for when it's unloading. There's digital stuff. There's CR2. There's CapFlex, mechanical modulation. There's all these different types of parts that potentially can be replaced in compressor. I just went through a few of the ones that you will see mostly. They're the ones that are out there now, but there's a lot of other parts potentially that you might have to look at, replace, repair. That's why going into those drawings that I show you in e-parts for Bitzer, or the spare parts, European spare parts manual for Copeland, that's really key. I want to thank you for taking the time, but I want to talk about, if you want to get better and you want to invest in yourself, I dive in way deeper on these topics, like this 4-week compressor masterclass that I got coming up. And I got multiple ones because I have lots of people asking me, I need more time. I'm in Australia and the time just doesn't work out at that time. But I do record these. So if you want the recordings, do the work, the quiz, the assignments, you can. But this one starts on Monday, June 6th. So it's 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time. So that's night for me. That's way late in the evening. But if you're on the Pacific Coast, it's a perfect time, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., or Mountain Time, 6 to 8 p.m. We're going to be diving into scrolls, semi-hermetics, how to troubleshoot properly, systems, getting into the electrical side. If you're in New Zealand, it's a great time too. Wednesday at 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Great opportunity. I have quite a few people come from New Zealand to my courses, or even in Australia. Tons of different, Perth, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Great morning session. And we're going to dive in to other parts of Europe. If you're in the middle of the night, well, these are recorded sessions. This is where you can ask the questions or send pictures. Like, take a picture, look at this. Let's talk about this stuff. This is how you get better, is by seeing the stuff that you're seeing and learning about the stuff in the field that you're working on. That's what these programs are about, conversations on what you're working on. And how do we figure out collectively to get you to where you want to be investing in yourself? Lots of different programs come out. So if it's not compressor and you feel like you're confident and you know compressors inside and out, scroll, compressor, semi-hermetic, I got supermarket training. So give you an upside on that. If you're 4, 5, 6 years in the supermarket side, I was there. I wasn't fully confident. I wasn't fully competent because I really didn't have, over that 4 or 5 years, I was just learning on my own. Then I went from construction to service, which was just a whole different world. This is why I build these programs, to really help take you to that next level, give you the ideas on how to build that confidence when you're out there on call or in a service call, what the components are, how to read a P&ID and what they even look like, as well as CO2. Got multiple CO2. I think I got 4 on the calendar now. If you're getting into that side of the business, if you're in a supermarket, you're going to start seeing CO2. Even if you're in air conditioning, heat pump CO2s, they're coming. Over the next 5 years, 10 years, there's going to be a lot of CO2 equipment in our market. So I just want to let you know that there's a lot of programs that I do offer out there. And you can also head to my YouTube channel and just say you can't make these programs, you can't afford to invest in yourself yet. You want to come to the program, you just can't afford to invest in yourself yet. Well, head to my YouTube channel. There's lots of information there, Instagram, LinkedIn, and share that stuff. Tag me in your social posts. I'll reshare it as well, because this is how we help other people learn about these little tips and tricks to make them better at compressors, working in commercial refrigeration, working on supermarkets, and even in depth more than that, check out some of these other educational resources. A lot of my friends out there sharing knowledge, trying to help you out, trying to help others out. Chris Stevens, HVAC Videos, got a ton of YouTube videos that will help you if you're working on commercial refrigeration, walk-in box, under-counter coolers. My good friend, Ty Brannaman, loved the HVAC. Tons of resources on his website. Lots of residential and commercial HVAC stuff. How do you use it? You got a great video on megameters. Just how do you use them properly? How to test compressors with them. North American Sustainable Refrigerant Council, a ton of CO2 information. Free. There's manufacturers put tons of content there, videos, technical documents. You got HVAC School, my good friend Brian Orr. So much information out there. Like, they want to help. You got Advanced Refrigeration Podcast, HVAC Know-It-All, AC Servitech, all different people doing podcasts, YouTube videos, training. My good friend Dick Wurst as well. Commercial Refrigeration for Air Conditioning Technician. If you don't have that book and you're looking for a good document to read, check that one out. Lots of questions and quiz questions at the end. And it's very, very good. Of all these people, give them tons of free resources. Donate to their channels. Help them out. Because all the stuff that we do takes a lot of time, costs a lot of money, and really help them out. Donate to them, whatever you can. Even if it's a thank you. Thank you for comment on their posts or on their videos. Say, thank you for putting this information out. It really helped me today. Share it with someone else. That's all they're looking for too. Just to help others out. That's why we all do this, is to really get some people to where they want to be. Get that confidence.
Hey, thank you for watching this video. I do hope it is bringing you a lot of value. If you are looking to grow and build your refrigeration teams and want them to learn CO2 refrigeration, head to the refrigerationmentor.com website, click to contact us, and let us know how we can build a culture around training inside your organization. Let's get a conversation going.